President Erdogan, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Good evening.
You are a key member in NATO. You also have a strong relationship with Russia. Given that, how do you see the Russian war in Ukraine and NATO's effort to try to stop it?
Öncelikle tabii
First of all, this question is coming at a sensitive time, and it's an important question. And
bizim gerek Rusya'yla
we have very important relations with both Russia and Ukraine.
önemli ilişkilerimiz var.
We
Hiçbir zaman
never want to have distance with these countries.
ayrışık
We
anlayış içerisinde olmadık.
always have followed on a peace process, both with Russia
Süreç işte.
and Ukraine.
Bu Rusya'yla da öyle oldu. Ukrayna'yla da öyle oldu.
We would never desire for such a war to
Bu
take place.
savaşın olmasını
But unfortunately,
asla arzu etmezdik. Ama ne yazık ki
this war
bu savaş milyonların
ended up with caused the deaths of millions.
Rusya'nın burada
Russia has very serious losses. Ukraine also has very serious losses, both in human terms and financially.
bir noktada kayıplar oldu.
We would not have wished this to happen, but unfortunately,
Ama ne yazık ki dünyanın gözleri önünde
right in front of the eyes of the world, we lived through this.
Some countries' leaders call you the Putin whisperer, that you have a relationship. So how do you think it will come to an end? How do you think Vladimir Putin will stop inside Ukraine?
Doğrusu
Truthfully,
Vladimir
our relations with Vladimir Putin
tanıştığım günden bu
have
yana
been good since the day we met.
iyi gelişti. Ama
These relations with
bu
Mr. Putin
ilişkilerimiz böyle gelişirken Zelenski ile
didn't mean that we had bad relations with Mr. Zelensky. Both Zelensky and the presidents of Ukraine that came before, I always had good relations with them. And these relations,
bu münasebetler de bizi
just like our relationship with Russia, our relations with Ukraine,
Ukrayna ile olan münasebetlerimiz gibi hep
we had a model that has good relationship with countries. That's what we developed.
How do you think NATO should respond to Russian warplanes and drones entering airspace in Poland, in Estonia, other NATO ally countries?
Doğrusu
Truthfully,
bir Türkiye modelini işletebilir.
NATO could use Turkey's model.
Bence NATO
I think
Rusya'yla da
NATO
Ukrayna'yla da aynen
should
bizim işlettiğimiz
use the model that we use with both Russia and Ukraine.
barış
In those
modelini
places, we worked on a peace model, and I think it would be useful for them to use it.
If NATO, if the U.S., if the allies do not stop Vladimir Putin, what do you think happens? Knowing Putin, do you think that he continues on inside Ukraine and elsewhere?
yani Ukrayna'nın
Currently, as we know,
gerek insan kaybı,
the human losses of Ukraine
insan kaybı
and Russia's
nedir
human
diye
losses, when we look at this,
Rusya'nın insan kaybı
Russia's human loss
ciddi manada
is
arttı ve
has increased, seriously increased. And when we look at it financially,
özellikle Ukrayna'nın
we can see especially that
ekonomik
Ukraine
olarak
cannot compete economically with Russia.
yarışması mümkün değil.
But we have to also see that
Şunu da görmemiz lazım ki
Europe is giving, I don't think Europe will sustain its economic aid to Ukraine forever. And currently,
geleceğine ben inanmıyorum.
this support is not being given
Bu destekler
and Ukraine is suffering as a result. Our hope is that this support will continue. But at the same time, the United States, I don't know how long it will give this support. I cannot estimate that.
Do you think the war ends soon?
ben biteceğine pek inanmıyorum.
I don't really believe that it will.
And that's not a good thing for the world.
İyi bir haber değil
It's not good news.
ve
And we thinking about this in this manner is heavy on our hearts.
There are a lot of things that are happening that around the world that are hotspots. Another big one, obviously, is what's happening in Gaza. Would you consider what's going on in Gaza genocide?
Başka türlü bunun izahı mümkün
I
değil.
don't think we can explain it in any other way.
Bu dört dörtlük bir
This is
soykırımdır.
completely a genocide.
Ve bu soykırımın
And this
faili de
Genocide is caused by Netanyahu.
Netanyahu çok acımasız
Netanyahu
şekilde
mercilessly
on binleri ne yazık ki
has
bu
unfortunately
durumla
killed tens of thousands with this
bunun
genocide.
dışında da tabii ciddi
Other than
manada
that,
yaralılar var.
there are a lot of
Yani
there are the wounded.
120 bin, 125
We
bin
think
kadar yaralıyı
120,000 or 125,000 of them,
aldık.
we took them in our country and we are providing medical care.
Ölümler
And all these deaths, unfortunately, are as a result of this genocide. And facing this genocide, nobody is saying anything. As Turkey,
bu soykırımın da tamamıyla karşısındayız.
we are in complete opposition to this genocide.
So, what do you say to people, including President Trump, who say the onus should have been on Hamas from the very beginning, understanding that the death is horrific and the numbers are horrible, but that the hostages, holding the hostages, taking the hostages, and using them, the onus should have been on Hamas from the very beginning?
Bu tabii tek taraflı bir
This is not a crime that is one-sided.
suç değil. Yani burada
When
Hamas'a
we just accuse Hamas about this, I think that would be wrong.
yanlış olur.
At the same time,
Öbür tarafta
the things that
Netanyahu'nun
Netanyahu have done, how can
nasıl
we
bir
put them
kenara
aside?
koyabiliriz?
For example,
Şimdi benim mesela
I
konuşmamda
am giving a speech
İsrail'in özellikle
and I say
Gazze'yi vuruşunu
I am talking about Israel hitting Gaza by providing pictures.
ve bu resimlerle
These pictures
İsrail'in Gazze'yi vuruşunda oradaki
will show how the people are being destroyed with Israel hitting Gaza. Now, can we say this?
şunu söyleyebilir miyiz? Hamas
In,
silah
in terms of armaments, can we say Hamas is stronger than Israel?
güçlüdür diyebilir miyiz?
It is not possible.
Mümkün değil.
When it comes to weapons,
Silah gücü itibariyle
it can't even be compared with Israel.
edilmeyecek bir imkanı var
And
İsrail.
Israel is using this power without mercy.
Acımasızca kullanıyor.
From age 7 to 70, children, women,
Çoluk,
the all elderly,
yaşlı,
they have no mercy.
acımadan
And these people have been killed and are being killed.
öldürülüyor.
You've heard President Trump talk about how he thinks about images too, but the images he thinks about are October 7th and what happened inside Israel. So, how does this come to an end? Much like Russia, Ukraine, how can this come to an end? Is there a deal that can be made?
Ben sadece şunu söyleyeyim.
I can only say this. Mr. Trump,
Bir ifade kullandı.
you might remember he used a term.
Rusya-Ukrayna savaşını
When-
ben bitiririm.
He said, I will finish the Russia-Ukraine war.
Bitti mi?
Did it end?
Hala devam ediyor.
It still goes on.
Aynı şekilde
Similarly,
Gazze savaşını ben bitiririm. dedi.
he said, I will finish the war in Gaza.
Bitti mi?
Did it end?
Hayır.
No. That means
Demek ki
once we start analyzing the issue, there are prices to
bazı
pay.
faturalar ödeniyor.
And when we look at the hostage exchange, that was done. It goes on.
Yapıldı.
Do you see Hamas as a terrorist organization?
Ben
About 20 years ago,
yaklaşık bir 20
when I
yıl kadar önce
traveled to the United States,
yaptığım seyahatte de bu soru.
they asked me this question again, and I said this back then.
Ben o zaman da demiştim ki
I don't see Hamas as a terrorist organization. On the contrary, I see it as a resistance
bir
group.
direniş örgütü olarak görüyor.
And
Bir defa
Hamas doesn't have weapons or
ne buna yönelik
a serious capability. And now
onlar var. Ve onlar şu
they are
anda
using what they have to try to defend themselves
korumaya,
and
kendilerini bu direniş
trying to protect themselves in this resistance movement. That's what they are as an organization.
Clearly, Israeli leaders, other leaders see Hamas in a terrorist aspect, and that's what is different. I want to ask you about your upcoming meeting at the White House. You and I talked in 2019 here on the sidelines of the UN, and we were talking about purchasing F-35s.
We are partners in the F-35 project. We are one of 9 manufacturing companies within the framework of F-35s, and until so far we have paid $1.4 billion. And on top of that, some of the components of the F-35 are being manufactured in Turkey. And for every aircraft that was not delivered to Turkey, we are losing $7 million. And 4 to 5 aircrafts were on the brink of delivery. But at the very last minute, the delivery was halted. And I don't think it's very becoming of a strategic partnership, and I don't think it's the right way to go.
In the statement that President Trump put out about your visit, he puts in there that a continuation of the F-35 talks, which we expect to conclude positively. So do you expect to get F-35s at the end of this visit this week?
şunu çok açık net
This is clear. I can say this clearly.
önceki dönemde
During the previous term,
bu soru
Mr.
sorulduğunda
Trump, when he was asked this question, he said,
Türkiye bu F-35'lerin ücretini
Turkey paid for these F-35s
ödediği halde
and
hala
they have not
işleri
received the F-35s. You are not giving it to them. He said this in front of the press.
şu anda tekrar tabii bu konuda
And right now, we are going to negotiate on this again. We expect that the United States will also do what it needs to do, both about F-35s and also the issue of F-16s and their production, maintenance, etc.
Do you see trade changing at the result of this meeting in the White House?
bence çok daha iyi bir konuma
I think it will improve greatly.
özellikle birinci
Especially
sırada savunma
We
sanayi
look at the defense industry at the top. That will come at the top. At the same time, in industry and technology,
ve Amerika arasındaki
Turkey
ilişkiler
and the United States
artacak.
will improve their relations. I will talk about all these things with Mr. Trump,
Türkiye'ye
and as
çok daha farklı olur.
it will be a different return to Turkey after that.
Finally, you'll speak here at the UN tomorrow, and one of the messages is about UN reform. As I mentioned, you're seen as a key member of NATO with a lot of different relationships that possibly could help NATO. What do you say to some of the leaders in the Allies who criticize how you operate inside your country? How do you address that criticism?
Doğrusu yani bizi
Truthfully,
hangi ülke nasıl eleştiriyor?
I don't know which country criticizes us in what manner. It would be hard to say anything without knowing that.
Biz
First of all,
yani haklının eleştirilerini
we
kabulleniriz.
accept the criticism of those who have a point, but if it's unfair criticism,
Gereken cevap neyse
we will
biz de o cevabı
respond
veririz.
in the way we should.
Şu anda
But
ortada
currently,
bir gerçek var.
there is a
Bu
fact,
gerçek de şu.
and that fact is Turkey
Bakın 50 yılı aşkın zamandır
has, surpassing for 50 years, has not been accepted into the European Union.
şu anda biz
Currently, we are a member of NATO,
Avrupa Birliği'ne
and
Türkiye'nin alınmayışını
the fact that Turkey is not accepted into the European Union,
haklı bir yaklaşım olarak
and I don't see that as a good approach. I think it's unfair.
Mr. President, we appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.